Hello and welcome to another episode of the HaskinCast Podcast. My name is Scott Haskin and I am your host on the HaskinCast Podcast, because who else is going to do it? I am very excited to bring you another episode this week. I've been trying to do this one for quite some time. My guest Rachel and I have been working on this for a while. She has a very, very busy schedule, and we were able to lock this down during the lockdown where her time still isn't that freed up, surprisingly. She's a very busy teacher, and her home lessons have picked up. And I believe at the time I'm recording this, I believe we're going to have a link to the show notes to where you can reach her if you're interested in getting lessons from her online. She's absolutely amazing, very knowledgeable, very skilled, very passionate performer, and she'd be a great person to get lessons from. So check that out in the show notes. And I have to give a shout out to Fry's Electronics, who, if you are on the West Coast in some areas of California, Arizona, and Nevada, not sure if they have stores anywhere else. They are a very large electronics store. They're kind of not quite Target size, but pretty close, it feels like. Tons and tons of components. They go so far beyond just computers and things. They have, cameras and appliances and gadgets and records. They sell LPs, which seems weird. It just seems weird to see LPs on the shelves anymore, but it's kind of neat. I just wonder, and Randy and I talked about this in the beginning of the podcast about how they were doing it, and I'm still a little bit skeptical about whether they're just taking the digital pressings and then just putting them on a 12-inch LP. I haven't heard any of them, so I don't know the quality. I don't know if it's recreated warmth or the actual original recordings that are being put directly to LP so that they have that natural analog warmth. But anyway, it's just kind of weird to see them on the shelves again. And they have quite a stock. They're expensive. They're like $20 a piece. And but kind of neat, just the same. And but anyway, so they now have, at least at my store here in Vegas, they have a pickup only at the front of the store. And you place your order online and you get a confirmation email that somebody has gone through the store and located your order so that when you go there, it is there available for you. They've pulled it and everything that you want is actually there and ready to go. So it's really cool. So they send you the email that they've received your order, and then they warn you that, hey, don't come to the store now. Wait like 20 minutes, give us time to pull your order, and then we'll send you an email that confirms we have your merchandise, which I think is really cool. And then, so you just go and it's all, the store's locked out. You can't get in, and they look at your order on your phone, and then they go and pull it and bring it to you, which is really, really cool. It's a great process, keeps everyone safe. In the beginning of all of this, I had to go pick up something. I can't remember what it was, but I had to pick up something and they were open. Like you could just go in the store. They had very few employees. It was kind of like you were playing a video game of a deserted electronics store. But anyway, so they've all changed that, and it's very cool. I also want to give a shout out to Office Depot /Office Max, who's doing the same thing. I had to get something for my new apartment, and I picked up a curbside. Very simple process. Very, very great that I don't have to go into the store and that they don't have to have people in the store. Some of the grocery stores are doing a great job with certain elements of their protection. Some I really don't understand. Our local grocer that I go to, not even half of the employees were wearing masks. They put up these glass partitions between you and the clerk that rings you up, but the partition does not extend to where you put your merchandise or where you go to pay for it. So where you're standing there and you're interacting with them the most, there's nothing between you and the clerk. So it's like it was a great idea that just had no intelligent execution to it whatsoever. So it's really interesting to see how different people have handled different things. But some of the smart people are taking advantage, like Rachel, who's now doing these lessons online, which is really cool. And now instead of just being central to her local area of Vegas, now she could teach people anywhere in the world, which is really sweet. So like I said, go check out that link if you're interested in learning percussion, drums, that sort of thing. And we talk about that in the show. And the challenges of teaching, I would imagine right now are incredibly difficult for teachers of all kinds. But I've always thought that drumming would be tough online because, the sound gets so clouded and really depends on how close you are, how loud you are, where the positioning of the microphone and the camera is. There's so much to it. I would imagine it would be quite a challenge. But Rachel is such a phenomenal player, and I've gotten to see her several times in different things that she's performed at. She's always performing, whether it's at Planet Hollywood doing Vegas the Show as a substitute drummer there, or percussionist, I should say, because she's really more of a percussionist. Or she's doing these different little productions that we have all over the city. The city is so much more than just the shows on the Strip. I mean, yes, it's nice to go see one of the big Cirque du Soleil shows, Le Rêve at the Wynn, where my friends Angela, Alex, and Tyler perform, or where my friend Vincent performs at Blue Man Group. Like stuff like that is really cool to see, but there's also a lot of other productions that happen, and some of them are just so cool, and they're so unique and different. So, when you come to town, ask around, find out what else is going on besides the main shows, and you might get to see something really special and cool. And there was one, the first time I saw Rachel play was at the steampunk version of Alice in Wonderland, which was just an amazing show. She was rocking it the whole night, and the show was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed it. And that was over at the Hard Rock at, I can't remember the name of the venue now, but there's a couple of different rooms at the Hard Rock where they have concerts. Of course, now it's all being remodeled, so I'm not sure what it's going to look like after the new version of it comes out, after Richard Branson purchased it a few months ago. So we'll see. But in any case, really hoping that everyone out there is staying safe, that you all have the supplies and food that you need. Reach out to people if you're missing something. See if somebody else can help you. And if you have something that people might need, let people know. We can all get through this if we just work together. And I see some of that happening, and I see some of that not happening. So let's all just be smart and kind to each other. And let's take a break. Let's listen to Rachel. We talked for a good hour, and I think you'll enjoy the conversation. All right, ladies and gentlemen, much like me, my next guest just bangs on things and gets paid for it. It's a pretty awesome way to live. Let's welcome Rachel to the show. Rachel, how are you?
Hi, I'm good.
Was that too simplified of an explanation of what you do?
No, unless you wanted to add the teaching part.
Yes, absolutely. You are a teacher, which, as we were talking before the show, is an incredibly vital part of our future and our present too, because I think it's really good that kids now are getting into music at young ages, because it keeps them not just occupied, but music has been proven to really grow us intellectually.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So you're teaching percussion, but you also teach piano.
Yes, I teach class piano at the school that I work at, just beginning and intermediate, and also the percussion, yes.
You were teaching guitar at one point too, weren't you?
I did. I taught guitar for 1 year.
Wow. That's a lot of versatility, because you're talking a huge variety in the type of instruments you're teaching.
Yes, yep. That I was about a week or two ahead of my guitar students, to be honest. But it all works. So we were all learning together, and they all went on with the classes that followed that, and they're all doing a great job. So
excellent. I'm learning bass guitar, and I've been an introductory student for about 6 years now. But I have not had a lot of luck with other stringed instruments. So to be able to go from percussion to guitar to piano, that really is a good versatility. I really, commend anyone who can do that.
Well, thank you. And during this self-isolation that we're experiencing right now, I also started picking up my ukulele.
Really?
So that's been kind of fun as well. Yeah.
Now, you and I have both been to the NAMM Show in Anaheim, and it is, there's a good portion of it that is just a sea of ukuleles. Yes. Downstairs in the E Hall
section.
E. Yes.
Yeah, Hall E.
I think that hall has more ukuleles than the entire world needs, but that's just me. But it's a simple instrument to learn how to play.
Yeah, it's really fun. And actually the one that I own is one of my percussion students gave it to me for Christmas a couple of years ago, and it was a kit. So I actually had to build it.
Oh, wow. That must have been a challenge.
It was. I had to do all the correct gluing and stringing and everything. And then my art teacher at my job actually painted it, like custom painted different things on it.
Oh, how cool.
So it's pretty cool. It's a little soprano one.
One of the things I do like about them, and especially walking down in Holly at NAMM, is that they all have such a personality because they really do a lot of work into the decoration of them and really make them a personal instrument.
Yes. Yep. They're gorgeous.
Very, very cool. So you're teaching for a school, but you're also teaching private lessons. Is that just percussion?
Yes. My private lessons is just percussion. I've got 10 private students ranging from grade 6 up till senior in high school right now.
Wow.
Over the years, though, I've taught, the youngest student I ever had was 5.
Really?
And she studied with me from age 5 until she went to college.
No kidding.
Yes.
But you're only like, what, 21, 22? It's not possible.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
But what is is it more challenging to teach a younger student or one that's kind of older and maybe like, yeah, I want to do this, but it's not my main thing?
I don't know. All of my lessons, I think, are just so customized to the student that I don't know if I can classify it as easy or hard, because it's like I just find what it is that's going to make them tick and motivate them to learn, and that's how we approach the lessons. And if they figure out that they don't really want to do it, then they might go on to try something else or whatever.
Sure.
But the young child, the youngest one that I had, like the 5-year-old, I usually don't have them that young, but she just caught on so quick and she loved it so much. It was easy to teach her at that young age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that makes sense. And I think it's really cool that you're giving them that personalized education that's molded to them, because I think one of the biggest problems in general in our education system is that everything is just form fitted. And if you don't fit in that, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah, that makes it really hard. And of course, that's what we get in a lot of our general education, which is why private lessons are so awesome.
Mm-hmm. Is it kind of the same in the teaching side of music when you're working for a school? Because the curriculum is just, it moves forward at its pace, and if you're a student, you just got to keep up with it.
Yes. And that's a tricky spot, because again, some are going to move fast, some are going to move medium, some are going to move slow. It's like you hear the terminology that people use, teach to the middle. Mm-hmm. But then I've also experienced people saying teach to the top, and the other ones have to catch up. I've also experienced the opposite of that, teach to the lower, so that you don't leave anyone behind, but then the upper gets bored.
Yeah.
So like, at least in my classroom, I use a lot of the kids that are pulling ahead quicker to help with the ones that aren't getting it right away. I'll pair them up so that they can help each other out.
That's good. And that's a great skill to learn, to have it kind of inbred into you that helping others is going to help you.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very, very cool. Now, being that you teach mostly percussion, I love drums. I love the sound of drums. I love rhythms, but I've also worked in a music store, and I know what a cacophony it can be. Does it ever just kind of like, oh God, will you all just stop playing for a minute?
Every so often, yes. Especially when in the classroom, when I give them, especially when we have new music, I'll give them time to practice it on their own. I'll say, take 10 minutes and practice it on your own. So then you got 28 kids or something, all percussion, practicing on their own. So yes, it is this big cacophony of sound, but the rule is that they're supposed to stay under a piano dynamic during that time.
Oh, okay.
So if it gets above that, which it does very quickly,
yeah,
it actually helps them to learn their dynamics too, because I stop and I say, what are we supposed to be practicing at? And they're like, piano. I said, what was that? And they're like, fortissimo.
So they know.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, I say I used to work in a music store, and I did, but after a while, I just stopped hearing things. I could walk right by somebody blasting away on a guitar through a Marshall cabinet and not even notice it. After, my brain just kind of shut it off, but I didn't need to be attentive to the customers because I wasn't a salesperson. But for you have to be focused and paying attention to what they're doing. Otherwise, you don't know where they're at.
Exactly. Yeah. I will say that there's sometimes I'm in my office and they're having one of those practice sessions, and an administrator or somebody will come in and talk to me, and I'm that same way. I'll just sit there and talk to them. It's like I completely shut out the background.
Yeah.
But the teacher, whoever is standing there talking to me, will be like, "How can you stand this?"
Well, yeah, and I think we train our brains, or they kind of train themselves to tune out things that are maybe loud but aren't a danger to us. Like, I don't need to pay attention to this right now, so I'm going to give you space to focus on something else.
Right. Yep.
Now, I say that you teach percussion. That's a very general term, because percussion these days really encompasses a wide variety of instruments. Is it mostly timpani, xylophone, marimba?
Well, those are like the foundation instruments that I teach on.
Mm-hmm.
Is snare drum and mallet keyboard to start with, and then kind of add in timpani, and then all the other stuff after that, depending on what their focus becomes and stuff like that. In my studio, the instruments that we focus on mostly as they get older and starting to think about college and stuff are the more concert percussion. Yeah, it's like you mentioned. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So all the mallet keyboards, the timpani, the snare drum, the accessories, the crash cymbals, the triangles, tambourines, all that stuff.
And then there's the wide variety of hand drums and drums you can sit on, and all those different things that we can use to make noise. One of the most fascinating things, whenever you pop into my head, one of the most enjoyable and fascinating moments I had with you was when we were at NAMM, and I got to film you and our friend Alex doing some marimba work to promote their new marimba for, it wasn't, what's the percussion company? It's not coming to me.
It was Majestic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yes.
And you guys did a great job. But you guys have played together quite a bit. Does it just, when you pull up a piece, is it easy to just pick it out most of the time, or do you really need to look at it a good chunk before you want to perform it?
Like the pieces that you saw us performing, I think we got together once before we went to NAMM to play them together.
Wow.
And that was mostly sight reading at that time. They weren't that crazy difficult. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, of course, it depends on that. But yeah, so if you can remember back to what you saw that day, we were mostly reading that for like the second time.
Wow. And it sounded so good. I mean, it didn't feel like you were struggling. You were very much together playing. And you actually did one piece that I would think was difficult, but maybe from your perspective, it's not, was You're So Cool by Hans Zimmer from True Romance.
Oh, yes. And okay, so that one, we had played together before. And yes, that is a more difficult one. That was one that Alex arranged for a wedding ceremony.
Wow.
Here in Las Vegas. And they hired us to play their ceremony. And that was the song that the bride came down the aisle to.
What an interesting choice. It's a beautiful song, but I wouldn't equate that to, maybe it's their favorite movie.
And that's what I'm wondering, because I don't know the history on their relationship with it, or if she just, loved that song or what, but,
right.
But, so that one we had played together before, and that was a bit trickier for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And without having done a lot of rehearsals, it always impresses me because, yes, I get that you can get really good at sight reading, but sometimes there's just difficult stuff that you have to play. And if you really don't have a grip on it, it can catch you off guard. Oh,
yes, definitely. There was a piece I did a couple of years ago for the Philharmonic that I got the music. I think I got the music like on a Monday or a Friday. So it was like within 3 or 4 days before the first rehearsal. Mm-hmm. And it was hard, like to the point that when I first looked at it, I thought, I can't play this in 3 days. And that was at like, say, 7:00 that night. Mm-hmm. And I practiced that night from like 7 until about 11. Next night, 7 about to 11. Next night. And I mean, I'm talking, I had my metronome set at like quarter note equals 40 beats a minute. And I was doing one measure at a time.
Wow.
And slowly, and I can't remember what the final tempo was, but it was not 40 beats. It was very fast, but I did it, and I went in and played it really well. Dare I say, and nailed it.
Right. Yeah. And not like the show nailed it where you don't actually come anywhere close to what they want, but actually
Right.
yes, I actually nailed it. Well, but that doesn't surprise me. And that, I think, really comes from a couple of things. Obviously, if you're going to be part of an orchestra or a group of any kind, you wouldn't be in it if you didn't want to do it. And you want to do what your job is to the best of your ability, to not be the one that screws it up for everyone else. And there's a passion for music and wanting to perform well.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. You're right. It's like, if you're not going to do it well, then why do it?
Exactly. And you are no stranger to performances of all kinds.
Yes, I've done quite a variety of things over the years.
Yes, you
over
have.
over my 21 years.
Yes, exactly. You have a long way to go. I've had the pleasure of seeing you perform many times, and I always love it because you kind of feel, watching you, and this is something you don't get to do live, is that you don't get to see the passion that you show you play with. You're not just standing up there playing what you're supposed to play. Like, I feel that you're inside of what you're playing.
Thank you for that. That's really cool that you say that too, because I think the only other person who's really ever stated it approximately the same way to me is my mom.
Wow. Well, see, now she and I would get along.
Well, and she passed about 5 years ago. So to hear you saying that now is that's really cool.
Oh, that's awesome. I knew about her passing, but I never knew she said that. So I feel very invigorated right now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Now, and the first time that I saw you play was at this sort of really bizarre Alice in Wonderland steampunk show.
Oh.
And it was so cool because it actually had a story that you could follow. Unlike a lot of our shows here in Vegas, where you're just like, I'm just here for the ride. I don't know what they're trying to tell me, but it's fun to watch. This actually had like a coherent story from beginning to end, and you played almost the whole show.
Yeah, there was a lot of music in that one. It was all great, and I think one of my favorite parts was the overture to that was when Dave Perico was writing that. And when he wrote that, he called me up, 11 o'clock, midnight, something, asking what the range of the glockenspiel was and how to do the notes exactly and everything, because it had such a prominent part. The glockenspiel. Yeah. We all like to say that word, right? Glockenspiel.
We do.
And we went in and read it down, and to this day, it's like, I just love playing that overture for that particular show. All the music was great, but that was like the original thing, you know?
It was a solid soundtrack. I really enjoyed the music. And but I think an overture is sadly diminished the first time you see a show, because you don't know what it means until the show unfolds. And by then you've forgotten what the overture was.
Yeah, you're right.
You have to go see it again to really appreciate how the show started, I think.
Yeah.
And that show was good. I would see that again.
Oh, yeah. That was a really fun one.
There was a revival of that at some point, though, wasn't there?
There was, I believe, down at the Brooklyn Bowl.
Okay.
That was the last place that I played it. And then after that, I'm not sure.
I saw it at the Hard Rock.
Yeah, so that's where I played it first, was at Hard Rock.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's the thing, is that people are really focused on the major shows here, the Cirque du Soleil shows, Blue Man Group, Le Rêve, shows like that. But there are so many other shows that perform here that are, I guess you'd consider them underground maybe, but there are so many great things to see here besides the big shows on the Strip.
Oh, yeah. Yep. In fact, it was like, now that we're having this time off, before it set in that we really had to just be at home, I found myself thinking, I should go see that one show. I guess I can't.
Yeah, I did that too. I've been meaning to get over to Planet Hollywood and see Zombie Burlesque for a long time. And I haven't made it over there. And I was just talking to Peter, who's the guitar player in the show. And I said, I really need to come see that. Maybe I'll do that next month. And then I can't.
Right. Exactly. But
Vegas.com is still sending me deals for show tickets. So I'm like, I don't know when to book my ticket.
I know. That's interesting.
It is.
I wonder if you can just get one, and then if we're not open yet again, they'll just keep extending it, I would imagine.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know that the actual ticket sites are open for purchase right now, unless they're booking like way in the future. But speaking of Planet Hollywood, you also perform at a show at Planet Hollywood. You play in Vegas, the show.
Yes, I am one of the sub percussionists there. There's the main percussionist, and then there's 3 more of us that go in and kind of rotate around him. So I play it quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I've been doing that since, I think this November it'll be 8 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think it's been open for 12 or something like that.
It's a great show. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's basically the history of Vegas. You kind of feel that old like big band era with the orchestra just on the floor behind what's going on. They have these wonderful sets, a lot of dancing, and a story that just kind of unfolds as Vegas was built up, and you see some very well-known people. But as a percussionist in that show, you are very, very busy. Yes,
there's very little downtime in there, and I love going in to play that show. And it's like you just go in and you get to, as you said, hit things. I mean, how can you ever be like an angry person if you get to hit things for a living, right?
Right, exactly. It's like somebody who works in a candle store. You're just smelling these lovely scents all day. You think you couldn't possibly get angry.
Exactly.
But is my perception wrong that show is just a workout for you?
It is. Yeah, there's a lot of moving around. And now that I've been doing it for so long, of course, it's like on autopilot. But sometimes I think about like when I first started and like the first couple, when you go in to learn those shows, if you are going in after the show's already open, you don't get like a practice or anything like that. You just learn as much as you can on your own. And then you go in and play a live show. And that's your training.
Right. They just throw you into the fire.
They just throw you in. So I remember that first night actually going in and I had my stuff set up at home the best that I could, to try to learn it.
Yeah.
And I tend to play, if I didn't have to wear shoes like in this world, I never would. I like to walk around in my stocking feet. So I practice like that and whatever at home. So I got to the show that first night, realizing then that the person who it's set up for, my friend Bob, is about a foot taller than me.
Oh, no.
And so here I was in like 3-inch heels. And so you've seen the show and all the running around. Like you said, the workout, I was doing that in 3-inch heels.
Oh, my God. I don't know how drummers in the 70s did it when they used to wear those platform shoes. And they would, some of the really good drummers were wearing shoes like that. I couldn't play in those.
No. Yeah.
But what really, I have to tell the story of what happened when I went to see you in that show. One of the acts ended and the lights go down and then this alarm sounds. And I'm like, okay, I don't know where this is going. And you don't, because the shows, they're not really predictable. They're not ones where you know what's going to happen next. And so I'm like, okay, I'm curious to see where this is going. And the lights stayed off and the alarm kept going. And I'm like, this is a little long. When are they going to start the act? And it kept going and going. And then I texted you. I'm like, is something wrong? And you're like, yeah, somebody pulled the fire alarm. Like it was not part of the show. But the timing of it was so perfect because it was literally the act ended, the lights went down, the fire alarm kicked in. They couldn't have timed that better.
Yes. Yep. It was. And then we were sitting behind the curtains. And so like when the curtains close, we're just kind of hanging out, getting ready for the next thing. And it's usually like, 5 or 10 seconds later.
Yeah.
Not that night. Yeah. Nope. We were all hanging out for a while.
It was very interesting. But the other thing that fascinates me about that show and a lot of the shows that we have here is that stage is really not that big, but they utilize the space so well. It feels like a big stage.
Yes. Yep. I remember going in to watch the show when I was going to learn. So I watched it from the audience first and feeling that same way. And then when you actually get up there and you're on the stage, you're like, this is not a big place, but they do. And to see how they're moving the sets around, behind the curtain and how they maneuver those giant things, it's crazy. It's pretty cool to watch.
Yeah, I can't remember. It starts out, or if it comes in a little bit later, but it like starts out where there's a whole town. There's buildings all over the place. And they find room for an entire city on that stage, and then they move it. And it's really impressive how they work that. And you have to give props to the people that are in charge of that and have to do that work, because they really have to be on the spot.
Yes, they do. And they have to get it done right now. Because as you saw, I mean, there's not a lot of time during the variety acts behind the curtain to get reset like that.
Right. Yeah. And that's, I mean, the shows pretty much run on a good schedule. People know where they need to be, but the fact that they're just always there and they don't really make a lot of mistakes is really impressive.
Yeah.
But what was it like for you the first night that you're like, okay, well, I've been practicing at home. How do you feel when you're, when the audience is walking in and you're like, okay, I got to do this. I hope I know the show well enough.
Yeah. Well, and that's it. You're just kind of like, well, I've done everything that I could do.
Mm-hmm.
I've prepared, I had the book for a few weeks beforehand. And again, it's like you just get to that point where you're like, even if I don't feel like practicing, but I always did for that show because it's so fun.
Yeah.
But it's like, you just have to do it. And you go in and you're like, I'm prepared as I'm going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And here we go.
Right. But are you nervous? Are you terrified? Or you just like find a calm?
I usually get nervous, and my nervousness manifests as like kind of sweaty palms, right? Kind of chilly, sweaty palms.
Mm-hmm.
And my stomach will always just be a little bit of a knot.
Right.
And I like that because, and I always tell my students this too. I'm like, if you're not a little nervous, that's when the accidents happen. That's when you make stupid mistakes because you're not staying focused on what you're supposed to do. And so it's nice to have a little bit of nerves. But yeah, that's always the beforehand feeling. And then once I get playing, it seems like everything's fine. It's like, it's the thinking about it that's more nerve-wracking than the doing it.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I remember the first concert I played it in public, not when I was just playing like snare drum or drum pad or anything like, I mean, like the first actual concert, I was terrified before the curtain went up. I'm like, I can't do this. I was just so convinced that I was going to mess up from the beginning. And I've never had anything overwhelm me like my nerves did. But 10 seconds into playing, it was gone.
You're fine. Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
And the weird thing is now I don't get nervous anymore. I kind of wish I would a little bit. And I haven't performed in a while, but I like, even when I've done plays and stuff, like I don't even get nervous anymore. It's weird.
Now you just go on. Well, and I mean, I guess there's a certain less anxiety that I feel now, but I think I always feel a little bit, not like when I go into the show, because I've been doing it for so long, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I get to play with you guys tonight. Cause
right.
The whole band rotates, all the chairs rotate, like 3 or 4 people. So that's the cool part, is like, you never know who you're going to play with, but everybody in that band is awesome. And it's like, oh, what band's it going to be tonight? So there's not as many nerves, for that one anymore. But each new thing that I do, sure, my heart still pounds in my chest. Trying to think of what I did something recently that, I can't, I'll think of it.
Okay.
I'll tell you. If I don't think of it now, I'll tell you later. But
okay.
There was something recently and I just remembered waiting to play, and my heart, when they say you could feel your heart in your throat.
Mm-hmm. I remember that. Oh yeah.
Feeling, and it was just recent. I'll remember, but yes, that was cool.
But it's one thing because, like you said, you've been doing this show for a long time. You're very comfortable with it. But you also do a lot of work with the orchestra where, okay, in 2 weeks, we're doing a big John Williams concert. In 2 weeks, we're doing a big Danny Elfman thing. I mean, that's got to keep you on your toes. Yes,
it does. And like I said, sometimes you get your music a month out. Sometimes I might get it a week out, so it just depends. But regardless of if I have 1 week or 4 weeks to prepare, I have to prepare.
Very true. But how much rehearsal time do you, I know the answer to this because we talked about it, but how much rehearsal time do you actually get with the orchestra before you perform in front of an audience?
So for those kinds of concerts, like you just mentioned, Danny Elfman and John Williams, I think we had 2 rehearsals.
Yeah, that's nuts.
And they were like, they're usually like a Thursday night, a Friday night, and then a Saturday morning. Sometimes they're a Friday night and a Saturday morning. Mm-hmm. And then like the, big symphonic works, orchestral works, we'll have a little bit more, like maybe a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So it equates to about 2 hours each rehearsal.
That's not much.
No.
When you think about the technical aspect of those 2 composers especially, that's not a lot of time to prepare to just be ready to perform pristinely in front of an audience.
Right.
Now, I would imagine the nerves are maybe a little higher up in your throat.
Higher on those ones, yeah.
Yeah. Was there a particular concert that you did along those lines that really stands out as something that you're just so proud of your performance or just even being a part of it?
I would say, yeah, the John Williams ones are just always so amazing. And I will never get tired of playing the first 4 measures and then the whole thing of Star Wars.
Yeah.
Because when that hits and it's like, oh my God, and I'm in this, I'm helping to make this sound. You know what I mean? It's
right.
like, it's just, it always amazes me. And I love doing that kind of music. When we opened the Smith Center, we played, it was Symphony 2. Oh, shoot. We might have to look this one up later.
Which of John Williams?
No. Oh, I just drew a big blank. I'll think of it.
Okay.
But that was another one too with the entire, Mahler too. Sorry.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah. Resurrection, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that has the whole choir and everything behind us. And it was just absolutely, again, just amazing to be on that stage. I think the one I posted on Facebook the other day was when we played Carmina Burana a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. Same thing. When you get on stage with that and you're part of it and you have the entire chorus behind you as well, it's just magical. And I just don't forget that feeling.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you were playing Star Wars, are you on, I'm trying to think of the percussion in the beginning. Are you on timpani or xylophone?
I'm on, my main instrument is actually the glockenspiel part.
Okay.
But when you play that part, you often also play the triangle. Mm. So like there's this big, triangle thing at the beginning, and that's the first big hit.
Oh, okay.
Along with everything else.
See, and who would think that you would get a charge out of playing a triangle? It just sounds like such a basic elementary school instrument. But John Williams loves the triangle. Oh
yeah. Yep. And his writing for percussion, it's difficult. Mm-hmm. And it's so fun. That's what's cool about that stuff too. It's like, it's so hard at first. And then once you're like, oh my gosh, this is so fun to play. It's just so fun.
I don't think he makes it easy on any musician. I don't think anything that's on his score pad is going to be a challenge no matter what you pick.
Right.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I've loved about the 2 years that you and I have been at NAMM together is that out of 150,000 people that are in attendance, we randomly run into each other every time.
Right.
And this year, I ran into you when I was actually standing in line to meet Steve Morse from Deep Purple. And you were getting ready to go play with your band Pan Rocks, which is a whole different level compared to anything we've talked about so far. Tell us about Pan Rocks.
Okay, so Pan Rocks is a steel drum group put together by my friend Tracy Thornton. I actually met him probably 4 years ago at a conference in Indianapolis, the Percussive Art Society International Convention. And he used to be a drummer and, or is a drummer, but along the way had discovered steel drums. And basically what he's trying to do is make them into a more like rock and roll instrument, because we usually associate them with the Caribbean music and stuff like that.
Sure.
Which they are, and they're beautiful. But it's like, okay, why not play something else on them? So he created Pan Rocks, and we recorded about 3 years ago. First of all, in Burbank, they put together a documentary, which you can find on YouTube if you look it up. And it's a documentary of us all playing different rock and roll songs. And our drummer was Stephen Perkins, and Tracy Guns, who was the Guns from Guns N' Roses. Mm-hmm. He's now the Guns for LA Guns.
Right, yeah.
And Billy Sheehan on bass, which is crazy, right? And then we had one of the guys from Kiss. He's not one of the original four.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to think of his name now. But anyway, so they all backed us. And Jane's Addiction, sorry, Stephen Perkins. So
what a
Perkins,
weird combination of musicians to put together.
Right, but we all recorded together, and did this big recording for Pan Rocks. And the following year, they did another one. It was all Rush music. And I was unable to do that one because I was already contracted into a different program for that weekend. And then NAMM came along, and Tracy got invited to play at the Ultimate NAMM Night, mm-hmm. which is the Anaheim NAMM version of the Ultimate Jam Night.
Right.
And we got to play with Mike Portnoy on drums and all these, again, big names. I don't even want to start saying them because I'll forget somebody.
Right.
But
but it's such an amazing, I love the concept of it, for one, like taking an instrument that we associate with just a certain polarized view and saying, you know what, though, there's something more that can be done with this. Like, let's think outside the box. Let's not use a bass guitar just for a bass guitar. Let's have it make sounds. Let's have it do something different. I love that concept.
Yeah, it's really great. And it was really even more special that night, too, was that we had already been planning to play YYZ from Rush. And then Neil Peart passed away like that week.
That's right. Yeah.
So it was even more special that we played that. But like saying the different sounds with the bass guitar and stuff, Tracy's actually working on a sort of like a wah-wah pedal. Oh. As far as I know, I'm pretty sure that he's working on something like that for steel drum because they're acoustic.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you can't hook something up and manipulate sounds.
Sure. I mean, you could do it electronically, or you could do something that sort of bends the metal configuration, like, like maybe something like you would, the way that a timpani works with a foot pedal. You could do something like that kind of concept with a steel drum. The metal would have to be flexible but sturdy, I think, to do that.
Yeah.
But I love the sound of steel drums. I mean, they're just a beautiful instrument.
Yes, I do love them.
Are they tough to learn?
They're tough. I remember the first time that I really saw a steel drum. I think I was at Disneyland, like in high school or something. And I saw some of the guys playing there. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, I'm like, I want to try that. I'm going to learn that. And it wasn't until college that I got my own pair mm-hmm. and started to learn it. And yeah, it's a whole different animal. I mean, there's nothing that you can relate it to.
They're kind of, they don't have a lot of play in the tone, right? Like you have to be pretty specific where you hit them, or is there a little bit of give? Like if you hit in this general area, you'll get the right sound.
On the bigger notes, because like if you ever looked inside one, there's like the notes that are like, 4 inches across, and then the ones that are like 1 inch across.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a little bit more give for the big notes, but they still have their sweet spot. So, you find the spot that's going to sound the best mm-hmm. and you aim for that spot. I think everybody always, I shouldn't say everybody. I've had a lot of people say, well, you have to be a percussionist to play steel drums, which is completely untrue. We do have an advantage just because we're used to playing with mallets already.
And you're used to that rhythm and just moving your hands in conjunction with each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think it's required for something like that.
No, and there's a lot of people that don't play any percussion instruments, but they play steel drum. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the setup of them and everything has nothing to do with like a keyboard or anything. There's situated certain ways, and you really just, I mean, for me at least, it was, again, putting one hand on one note and repeating to myself, this is F, this is F. When my hand feels like this is where F is.
Oh, okay. That's a good association.
Right. And then it was like, okay, my hand is at this angle, that's G. That note right there is a G. It was very slow going, and I don't know if other people have other ways of learning, but that's how I did it.
No, that association works. I mean, you'll get it too, just if you're, if you know what an F is in whatever octave, then some people can do it by just by sound, and then other people do it visually. Other people do it by vibration. But that's a great association. I like that. I want to ask you too, and I don't know if you ever saw the guy. He used to play in front of the MGM Grand every night. Older gentleman. I think he moved down to Fremont Street, but he would play along to a little boombox, and he would play the steel drums to popular songs. Yeah. Kind of neat. He did a good job. I got kind of tired of it after a while, but you have to remember that the most of the people that walk down the strip are transient. They're here once or for a couple of nights. And I walk down the strip like once or twice a week. So for me, I experience the same things over and over again. And I have to remember, but yeah, how many other people are walking up and down the street that have never heard this guy and never will again? Yeah. And they just see him once, and that was the cool thing. I go out and do things like that, mostly for like private parties and stuff. Mm-hmm. But same thing. It's like I have tracks and I have me. Right. And in the olden days, we had a 18. Band. Yeah, we had a band. And actually all went out live. And these days it's more of tracks. So we took the band in the studio and made the tracks. So they're pretty cool because they're, actually us playing. So it's a little bit more versatile now, because it's like, well, we'd love it if you would hire the whole band, but if they can't do that, you can start kind of scaling it back. I just don't know how you find the time to schedule anything like that in the middle of having students and doing, preparing curriculum, grading papers. Then you've got your show that you're a sub in, and then you've got, you got to do a Prokofiev symphony. Where do you find time to do these other little projects? I don't know. Sometimes I meet myself coming and going. I would imagine. But that's part of the passion, isn't it? I mean, you wouldn't take those extra gigs if you didn't really want to do something different. Because I would imagine, even though you're doing these shows that you love, like it does get stale after a while if the shows aren't changing up a little bit here and there. It could, yeah. I for myself at least have had very few times in my life, if I've played something a lot of times, that I get sick of it, because I just love being there doing it. Right. But I know I've talked to some people over the years that are just like, oh my God, if I have to play this one more time. And then they turn around and say, but I'm really lucky and blessed that I get to play every night. Yeah. I think it's that perspective. And I would also think that, when you look out at the audience and you see they're enjoying what you're doing, that gives you a little bit of a charge to get through maybe one song that you just don't feel like playing that night. It does. There's always one, or even in my steel drum tracks, there's one song, and every time I get to it, and it's all just the book is in order with the tracks. Right. And every time I get to that song, I'm like, oh, I was going to take that out. Yeah, I use that same phrase with, I was going to block that person on Facebook. I meant to do it. There's that person again. Right. I want to ask you too, because I find the marimba to be a very fascinating instrument, because for me as a drummer, and I'm a kit drummer more than a percussionist, I can do a little bit of percussion, but I'm not skilled in that. So I play the kit. And when I watch somebody play a marimba, I'm like, okay, but you're holding two mallets in each hand. You're not just hitting one thing, you're hitting two. Like, how do you learn that? So the way I learned it, and I didn't start 4-mallet marimba until college. I teach it to my private students now, somewhere around 7th or 8th grade. Mm-hmm. But I didn't learn it till college. And at that time I had a job in a portrait studio. And whenever we didn't have people there,
I had my mallets at work and I would just hold them. And that was the first thing, because it is so weird. It's so weird to first learn how to hold.
Yeah, it looks awkward.
And like when I teach my students now, their first like 2 weeks of 4 mallets is just hold the mallets. I like, if you're watching TV, hold the mallet, just hold them, keep it, and learn how to move them. And there's certain exercise you can do to use gravity to drop the mallet and bring it back up, which is what I used to do at work at the portrait studio, sitting there waiting for our next people. Mm-hmm. I'm just sitting there with my mallets. I always had a pair in my car.
Right.
Sitting at the red light, I'd hold the mallets. and then there's just technique exercises, just like everybody else, to, start maneuvering them on the instrument.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's interesting. I that makes a lot of sense, but I would have never guessed that.
And I don't know. I mean, that's how I did it. That's how I teach it. I can't speak for other teachers, but I have found that is the best way to do it, because they have to become like your fingers. Mm-hmm. I pick them up now and it's like I can just pick them up and play, but I've been doing it forever. So, yeah. But I have to remind myself that when I'm trying to teach my 7th grade kid, and they're just so awkward.
But is it a double strike on one bar, or are you hitting 2 different bars at the same time?
Oh, 2 different notes. Yeah.
Really? Okay. So you're really playing 4 notes at the same time at any given time throughout a piece. That's a lot to keep track of, isn't it?
It is. And, but again, the more you do it, this just happens, as you learn pieces and permutations and techniques. Mm-hmm. And then you go to, 6 mallets. I did some 6 mallets in college.
That's crazy.
I did enough to, know how to do it, and if I need to. But some people have really excelled on that. And my professor did his whole dissertation on that, which is why probably, we all learned it as part of that too. And
at the end, you hit the triangle with a tiny mallet that you've been hiding in your mouth the whole time.
That's right.
It's fascinating to watch, though, because there's a real art form. It almost looks like a dance in a way. When you see somebody playing a rhythm on a marimba, especially if they're using multiple mallets, it just looks that much more impressive. But there really is a beautiful art to watching somebody play that instrument.
Yeah, I agree. It's just the instrument itself is beautiful. Number one, it's like those grand instruments, and then watching the mallets and watching the movement. Yeah. Yep, I agree.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I love the sound of it too. It just, if you're in the right room where you can really hear it, just the way that the tones decay, and it's just such a beautiful sound. I think it's very much, though, like steel drums, marimba is often considered more of like an island type instrument.
Right. Yep.
But it's in orchestras.
It is now. Yeah. And it's still not as prevalent as glockenspiel and xylophone and even vibraphone. But we do use it, and it's becoming, more common. Mm-hmm. But yeah, if you look at the history of marimba, that would be a whole other podcast. But
well, when we get the steel drums into the orchestra,
right,
which Pan Rocks may be on its way to creating.
We could be, yeah.
I love the fact that you had to turn down playing with these well-known and famous musicians because you had another gig booked. I love the concept of that. That's so much fun to me. It's like, I'm sorry, Mike Portnoy, I've already got something else I'm doing.
It was awful. I was like, are you kidding me? Why does this have to be on the same? Literally, it was the same 2 days.
Yeah, that just had to be painful, I'm sure.
It was very painful.
Yeah. I got to see Dream Theater perform years ago in Denver. They were opening for Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and Deep Purple was headlining. So it was a drummer's dream, that show. And I was so impressed with his playing. To listen to him on a record is one thing. To watch him in a video is one thing. To see him live, that's a whole nother level of musicianship.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And if at the Ultimate NAMM night when we played with him, I was about 2 feet from him.
Oh, okay.
I was like on stage. So I'm playing and I'm just like literally looking over my left shoulder, watching him play. Yeah. It was amazing.
Is it hard to watch that and still pay attention to what you're doing? Because I think I would just stop playing and watch him.
No, I would do it on parts where I was doing like some chord comping. So I play the double seconds for steel drums. And so sometimes I have melody and then sometimes I'm playing harmony chords. And if I'm playing melody, I have to watch everything that I'm doing.
Right. But
if I'm comping, if you're on one chord for 4 measures or 8 measures, something like that, and just switching to another one that's close by, that's when I was watching him.
Yeah. Now, wasn't that performance another one? I could be mixing it up with another one that you did because you do so many, but wasn't there like some really tough parts in that performance too? Yes, that was on
YYZ. So we did 2 songs that night. It was YYZ and Bob O'Reilly, also known as Teenage
song.
Wasteland. And Bob O'Reilly wasn't too crazy, but YYZ, yeah, there was some stuff in there. And so going back to what I was saying earlier about setting my metronome at 40.
Oh yeah.
It was that, because all those runs, if you know the piece, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about that whole beginning part. I'm not going to try to sing it because if I try to sing, you'll know why it's better that I just play an instrument.
You and me both.
But all that stuff at the beginning, all those runs with the stops and the different meters and stuff, we all had that in unison.
Oh, wow.
And we didn't have we had a rehearsal that morning for about an hour in the hallway of the venue. Just the steel drums. So actually, when we played that night with Mike Portnoy and all those guys, that was the first time that we all played together.
Wow. That's amazing. And I saw the video and it's so incredible that you guys sounded like you'd been playing together for a long time. And I think that's moving out to actually when I moved to California, and I started meeting some people that were in the film orchestra, it was kind of the same thing. They really do not have a lot of rehearsal before they just start recording the soundtrack. And when you think about some of those composers like Danny Elfman or John Williams, where you're playing a lot of difficult stuff, you would think it would be 2 weeks of rehearsals, a lot of last minute changes and things like that. But much like you guys, where, you're like, all right, we have our parts. It's up to us to learn it. And then we get together and we do it a couple times and then we're like, okay, we're good to go. I would have never conceived until I started meeting people like you that that's how it's done. I would have thought weeks, if not a couple months of rehearsals.
Yeah. Yep. And I get that a lot. People ask me that. They're like, how long were you guys rehearsing for that? And I'm like, this morning.
Yeah.
But of course, like you said, we're all doing our own stuff for weeks ahead of time. But as far as being together as one unit, you don't get a whole lot of time.
No, you really don't. But even freeform musicians, like if you go watch some really good jazz, we have a club here called the Dispensary, and there's some really amazing jazz musicians that just pop in. And the first time I went there, I went to see my friend Derek Jones, who plays bass over at Ka. And I walk in and I'm like, wow, these guys are really good. And I sit there and listen to a few songs and then they take a break and he comes over and I said, how long have you guys been playing together? And he goes, tonight.
You're right.
Like, what? How is this possible?
In places like the Dispensary, that's, all those guys get off their shows.
Yeah.
And they just go and jam out together. I know, it's awesome.
But there's a certain, I think you can get away with that in jazz in a way you can't get away with in other forms of music because jazz is so freeform. And as long as your goal is, I'm going to play my part while everyone else is shining, and when it's my turn to shine, I'll shine, and you're respectful of the other musicians, you'll get something great out of it.
Right. Yeah.
But it's just so amazing that it's just pure, this is what I'm feeling in the moment kind of music. And I love that.
Yes. Yeah. I always wish I would have gotten, I shouldn't say more into jazz because I love jazz, but I've never been like a real jazz player. It just wasn't something that was available to me growing up.
Okay.
As far as like in my schools and stuff. And so I just kind of never really did it. And so even now I find myself, if I am in a situation where somebody wants me to take a solo, that's when, okay, so now we're back to when are you nervous?
Oh.
That's when I get nervous.
Yeah.
And then everybody always says, well, there's no wrong notes. And if it doesn't sound right, just move it by a half step. It'll be right.
There you go. Just pretend you were working your way down to that note.
Right.
And you think about, in the 70s when drummers were playing 15 and 20 minute drum solos to 40,000 people. And I'm like, it's so bizarre. But the attention span isn't there for that kind of thing now.
No,
I don't think. But
different.
I'm actually not a big fan of jazz. I don't ever crave listening to it, unless it's jazz fusion. Like I love Chick Corea and the Electric Band, that kind of stuff. But when I go down and I see it performed, I have such an appreciation for it. I wouldn't listen to it on its own, but I love seeing it performed.
Seeing it live. Yeah, that's my favorite, is seeing it live.
Yeah, for sure. Well, before we wrap up here, I want to ask you, especially as a teacher, I think that you would have some good insight into this. Percussion is such a beautiful world. And I think that there's a lot that we as musicians get out of it intellectually and physically, emotionally. But for somebody who really wants to get into the world and doesn't really know where to start or what instrument they want, what would you suggest if they came to you and said, Professor Rachel, I really want to get into drums, but I don't know where to start. What would you tell them?
I get that a lot from my students that come in when they're, 8, 9, 10 years old, whatever. And I just tell them, well, let's take these first several lessons and try out all the different instruments. And usually one will resonate more than the rest with somebody. Mm-hmm. Like they'll want to do drum set, or, I really like the timpani, or I really like this snare drum. And so then we'll continue lessons. And I do teach total percussion. So like I said earlier, I teach the fundamentals, but we're always branching out.
Sure.
So we'll find the one that resonates with them the most. And I mean, even though timpani isn't like a starting instrument, if that's something that's really interesting them, I work it into even their beginning lessons, even if it's just like 5 minutes of ear training or something like that. And then eventually they figure out what part of percussion they like the best, and kind of, if that makes sense. And then they'll, carry on more on that instrument, but I still make them do all the other stuff too, because we all need to do everything.
Well, yeah, it's good to be well-rounded too, because something that you learn doing one thing, you might be able to create something doing something else. Like if I were to sit there and play rototoms, or what are they, like the quads for a marching band, I might learn something on that I can take back to the kit and go, you know what, I had this rhythm I came up with. Maybe I could see how that plays on a kit.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, you can always cross instruments like that. It's funny that you picked that instrument, because that's what I played in high school. I marched the tenors. Yeah.
I marched, I think, for 3 days with the marching band playing bass drum. And what happened was we relocated from Michigan to Colorado, and I had a drama class in Michigan, and I only had 1 month before the end of the school year when we moved. And so they didn't have a drama class for me to go into, or they did have one. And then I started, I think, in band the next year. But I was not as skilled as those kids were in my sight reading. So I was really behind. So they put me on bass drum, and I'm like, I don't even have any notes in this piece. Why am I marching? I didn't have that same camaraderie that I did with the teacher that I had in Michigan in fifth grade, where he was the one that gave me the extra hours to go in and learn the rudiments. And so I never found anybody that I really wanted to learn from or enjoyed, somebody that made me want to work. Right. Yeah, that's very, very important. Yeah, what you do makes a big difference to those kids. And I know you well enough to know how you interact with them. And I'm sure that a lot of people continue to play because you're there inspiring them. So thank you so much for that. Oh, it's my pleasure. Yeah. My last question for you, I actually meant to ask you this in the beginning, but how did you find your way into percussion in the first place? The reason I ask that is because it's not a very female-oriented instrument. Music was always very segregated. Girls played the flute and the oboe, boys played the drums. So that must have been a weird thing for people.
Yeah, it was interesting actually, because when I was young, my two older sisters and I inherited my grandmother's organ. She was a music teacher, my dad's mom, and she passed away before I was ever born. So I've never known her, but she was a music teacher, played all the instruments, but she played the church organ and everything. So she had this Hammond organ.
Oh, I love the Hammond organ.
And we inherited it as young kids. And my mom said, well, we've got this organ in the house, so you three girls are going to play, take lessons, which was a pretty big deal because it was hard to come by in where we were to get lessons like that. But we got it worked out anyway. So fast forward ahead 6 years to when I go to sixth grade, and I'm signing up for band, and I already played a little clarinet and flute because my sisters played those. And so I was going to sign up for flute. And there was the list, and there's like 20 people signed up for flute.
Of course, yeah.
And then, so I thought, well, I'll sign up for clarinet. There's 15 people signed up for clarinet. And the next thing said percussion, and there was nobody signed up.
Really?
So I put my name there because I was like, I don't know what this is, but nobody else has signed up. So that means I'll get it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And there's not a lot of room for a Hammond organ in a sixth grade band.
Right. And isn't that hilarious? So, and then we found out, and growing up in small town Wisconsin was a little bit different than being in the big town here. But our teacher was able to require that you had to have 2 years of keyboard experience in order to take percussion as a beginner.
Really?
So therefore, I already had 5 years experience, and I was in, and I never left.
Well, what's the rationale behind that? Do you know?
I think being a teacher now, I think that with all the technical things that you need to teach to wind players from the beginning, percussionists often kind of get left behind because they can make a sound right away, right?
Right, yeah.
And so that's why percussionists get in trouble, because they get bored. They get bored waiting. But if you already had 2 years of keyboard experience, you can transfer that to the mallet instrument very quickly. True. And you can play along with the band right away.
Well, and a lot of people don't realize that piano actually is a percussive instrument. Right. Yeah. Well, that makes sense. And really, too, there's certain rhythmic things to playing piano as well. So I could see that being an advantage. I've never heard of that being a requirement for percussion, but yeah, I guess that does make sense. Yeah. And so everybody that was in the percussion section in my sixth grade band, we all had experience already. So we were able to, do the right thing like right away. And our teacher could work a little bit more with the winds, and then we could bring it together very quickly. So yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. I love that. Yeah. I love when people just kind of fall into something that they find that passion for, because you didn't go in wanting to be a percussionist. You just kind of fell into it. And then, look what you've turned that into. You're playing all the time. You're teaching kids. You're entertaining a couple 100,000 people a year, if not more. I mean, that's a lot for somebody who wanted to play the flute. I know. Isn't that crazy? It is. Yeah. I count my blessings every day. I really do. Even when I'm sitting in a rehearsal sometimes and I've got 2 notes to play, and I'm sitting there and pretty soon I'm sitting there. I'm like, this is so cool. Like, just watching this all come together and being a part of it. And I would have never thought in my wildest dreams, growing up my town had 100 people in it. Wow. But I went to school in a town down the road that had a little over 2,000. Okay. But, still, it's like I moved here and my high school had 3,000. Yeah. So it's such a difference. And I love going back home, and my family's there, and my nieces and nephews and everybody are there. But had I not come out here when I did, I don't know where I'd be. And I feel really lucky to be here. I think it's a combination of that and you taking advantage of the opportunities too, because being here does not make you successful. You have to go for things that you want. And if you don't do that, you're never going to get anywhere. It doesn't matter how good you are, how passionate you are. You gotta find the opportunities.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for coming on the show. I've had such a good time talking to you. I always enjoy talking to you. And whenever this pandemic is over and we can get back to a normal life, you'll be back out there on stage entertaining lots of people. But at least in the meantime, you're able to teach.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, well, definitely come back and see us again. It was a lot of fun.
I will. Thank you very much.
You bet. Take care, Rachel.
Okay, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, she's such an awesome person. I'm so glad we were able to finally do this. And, you know, a lot of this, we had a really good conversation after NAMM one year heading to a party. I think it was at the Hilton. And I just learned so much about how the process works, and it's not at all what I expected. So I'm really glad that we were able to finally talk and that she wanted to come on the show and share this with you guys. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. Go check out the links in the YouTube video. Getting to play with Mike Portnoy must have been just a blast. I can't even imagine. But anyway, you know, you got to take advantage of those opportunities when they come. And if you don't have them coming, you got to go find them. That's how you succeed in this business. And she's doing great. So thank you for joining me for another week of the HaskinCast podcast. We'll be back next week with another podcast. And I'm actually getting ready to upload that, so it's done before my move. You guys have a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.